The military, of course, was the one that originally started it, and that's where I got my first exposure when I was on the faculty of the Air Force Institute of Technology after I did my PhD. Okay, and we simulated a regional war on the other side of the globe in terms of providing the logistics support. We had 5 people on the team, the same jobs that they normally did before they came for the short course. One person was the supply officer. One person was the maintenance officer. One person had a inventory control problem, so forth, that he worries with. Okay, so each one of them has a job, and they collectively make decisions when provided with hypothetical situations. It's remarkable what happens, because they will turn to you as the monitor and will say, I made that decision. Did I make the right one? I've taught for many years, and I have never been able to stand before a class and lecture and have somebody beg for information. Did I do the right thing?
Right.
Okay. Same thing in medicine. One of the first techniques that was used when they switched to simulated teaching was they had hypothetical patients who would come in. I remember one of them, I was told, supposedly had a lump on the neck. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction was, okay, that's a cancer. All right. But the students were provided with the computers. They were provided with the resource professors to help them. They were given all kinds of lab equipment that could be used to test various things. And it turns out it wasn't cancer at all. Okay? All right. Simulation can be done in such a way that people will learn how to solve problems. My final statement on this is this can be done at a very elementary level. Okay. You could take a group of third graders and you can say to this 5 bunch of kids, all right, we're going to simulate the growth and the management of a garden. You're going to be responsible, Joe, for land preparation and weed control. Okay? Sally, you're going to have the responsibility for dealing with the decision as to what kinds of genetics to use and what kind of care that plant needs as a consequence of the genetic base that it has. Another person may have the responsibility of deciding on the irrigation. All right? You can simulate the entire life of a garden with third graders. Okay? Simulation can be done at almost every level, and you can begin at even the 3rd grade, maybe even before that, to teach problem solving.
Okay. Going along with the socioeconomic issue, there seems to be a gap in achievement around the country as well as here in Columbia. Do you think that something needs to be changed with the academic model here in Columbia to help shrink that gap, or what's your feeling on that?
Yes, I have some very strong feelings on that point. Okay. Recently, I happened by chance to hear the State of the State address by the governor of New Hampshire.
Okay.
And one of the points that he made in his address to his joint assembly was, we are working toward the goal of having 100% graduates of our high school. So number one, you got to have high goals.
Absolutely.
That state had it. We may not have it dictated for the whole state, but we can decide, Columbia, Missouri should have that as a goal. Okay. So then the next question is, how do you make it happen? I'm told by educational psychologists, and I'm no educational psychologist, I'm an economist, okay? Right? But I'm told that in many instances, there are signs, even at the first grade, of students who are likely to have problems during even their elementary school years, much less their high school years. I also happen to belong to one of the largest Kiwanis clubs in Columbia, Missouri. Many of our members are retired. They've raised families. They're interested in children. That's what Kiwanis is all about. Okay? So, why not, with the expertise that is required, this can't be done just willy-nilly. This needs to be done very carefully. But to match some of those retired parents, even with the youngster at the first grade, so that they learn to be able to trust an adult. Okay? And caring and trusting are part of the essence of what we have to deal with if we're going to deal with this gap that you're talking about. It's got to start early, it's got to be community-wide, and it needs to be done in a managed way.
All right. In terms of teachers, there's a proposal in Missouri that's trying to eliminate teacher tenure. What's your position on that? Do you think teachers should be allowed to gain tenure?
I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay.
When the chancellor moved from our position to a job here in Jesse Hall, I followed him as the head on a temporary basis. The social science unit, which included a number of departments and about 35 professors. I developed a methodology that enabled me to account for every dollar that every professor spent. Not only that professor's salary, but the portion of the secretary that he had benefit of, the number of graduate students and the amount of money that was invested in them, the number of travel resources that he or she had, et cetera, et cetera. And then I took a look at the evaluations of the students. Every student had to fill out an evaluation form on every course. And I spent hours going over those and got a sense of the quality of instruction in addition to the total number of student hours that professor was responsible for. Okay? You put those two together and you have a cost-benefit analysis. So that I was able, when I went before the deans in our college in making my salary recommendations, I was able to tell the dean who our high-cost producers were and who our low-cost producers were. We had one professor who had tenure, who had essentially retired on the job. I recommended 0 increase in salary. Okay. All right? So, my answer to this is there is some merit in tenure because of the fact that it gives both the hiring institution and the teacher some assurance of job security. I believe at minimum there should be a cost of living allowance, a COLA, set aside for every professor in the reserve funds of the district. All right? So that we don't get into situations like we had several years ago where all of the faculty were told no raises, 0 raises. Okay? And that's one of the issues today. What this boils down to is to say there's merit in tenure, but tenure can only be rewarded if there's increase in the effectiveness of the teaching that the person is responsible for.
Absolutely. And I guess one final question. You were part of a state championship debate team.
Yes.
I want to know what your beliefs in extracurriculars. Um, how beneficial are they to students? Um, I know it's a challenge with the shrinking budget to keep extracurriculars alive. What do you think needs to be done in terms of extracurriculars? Do you plan on pushing those, or kind of keeping the core curriculum as it is and pushing aside the extracurriculars?
Again, that's a very challenging kind of a question. Okay. Um, we've got to be awfully careful that we don't isolate our students. I recently went to 2 Mile Prairie School and said, in years past, we used to host tours of students who would come to our farm and would see what causes things to grow and where the eggs come from, et cetera, et cetera. I want to invite you to have some of your students visit our farm, only about 1.5 miles away. And I was said, thanks, but no thanks, because the travel funds have been eliminated. I said, well, that's no problem. We've got some vans. I can haul them back and forth. Sorry, liability insurance won't allow it. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is we're limiting tremendously the education that those people will need when they get out into the real world. And so my inclination is to say the best alternative that we can do is to use simulation over and over and over again so that they will see via the computer the kinds of consequences that they would see if there were extracurricular activities that they could be involved in.